Does it look good, Allison? Everyone chimed in? All right, great. I want to welcome everybody to this webinar. My name is Jackie McFarland. I'm a case manager at the Fort Bend Center for Independent Living. We're a nonprofit that serves people with disabilities to live as much and as independently as they are able and willing to live. And today we're partnering with Allison Schaberg of the Consolidated Planning Group. Allison is a special needs financial planner who's going to be talking about transitions today. I'm going to be watching the chat, so if you have questions or comments, go ahead and post them there, and we'll get to them during the presentation or at the end. And with that, I'll turn it over to Allison.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline. We appreciate you guys having us back again today. So again, Allison Schaberg, Consolidated Planning Group, and no long introductions needed. We are just a special needs planning firm working with families, custom designing plans for your needs, wants, and goals, and for that picture of the future for your special needs loved one. So today we're talking about transitioning and talking about some tips for launching your special needs teen into adulthood. This is near and dear to my heart. I am truly, a mom first. So I'm a mom. I have 4 kids and 2 with special needs. I've got one that's still a minor and that one that has transitioned into adulthood. And so I have lived this and kind of gone down this highway and definitely, even as a professional that does this for a living, understand the challenges. There's a lot of questions. This process of planning and where do we need to go and what do we need to do, it's unnecessarily convoluted. I think I like to call it unnecessarily convoluted. So it is difficult, but we really pride ourselves in putting some information out there to you that will hopefully make your journey a little bit easier. This is being recorded today, so as a registrant, you will get an email with the recording with the slides. If you have any questions, as she said, just put them in your chat box, and we're going to get to those as quick as possible. Okay, so when it comes to transitioning and planning, one of the first conversations I think as adults that we have to have with ourselves is setting the realistic expectations. So we have hopes and dreams, we have expectations, and sometimes our expectations don't meet the ability or the capacity of our loved one with a disability. And sometimes our own expectations and our own hopes and dreams are I don't know, there's kind of this collision of what society says our kids are supposed to be able to do or what other people's kids are doing, or we're looking around and things like that. So when I say this, I say this in the kindest way because I myself had to do this. Like, where are we? Where are we? Where are we going? What is the real deal? And are we ready to take the next step? And so really understanding your child's strengths as well as weaknesses, and really thinking about what does this path look like? Is it a traditional path? What is traditional anyway? Is a traditional path that we're going to go to a 4-year university post high school, or is it a non-traditional path? Maybe we're going to stay in high school until 21 or 22. Maybe we're thinking about trade school or transition schools, maybe a reduced college course load. And so what I want to say here is you just really are where you are. Okay. So as it relates to the planning and when if we're pushing our kids into the deep end, they might sink, right? If they're not ready for the deep end. So if that reduced college course load and we take one course, for one semester and they do well, they have some success, or they go through this transition program and then they're ready to take one course, or they're ready to kind of move into some, post high school programs or other things like that. I think these are all things to keep an open mind about, consider these options. And I don't know. I just say really take a step back and work with the professionals that are working with your loved one. These are the ABA therapists. These are the teachers at school. You know your child best, but combined with all of the other brains that are working with your child, I think that together you can come up with a really great plan. So So when we're talking about finding a good fit, we're talking about schools and colleges, extracurricular activities, career path, work setting. We're looking at all of those things and finding a good fit. And what we're really trying to do as we're thinking about transitioning is thinking ahead, because a lot of times it comes, senior year, or we're here, it is April, and my child is leaving the public high school in May next month, and now what are we going to do? So if that's you, it's okay, but the sooner you plan, the earlier you plan, the more likely it is that your child will come home from the public high school and transition smoothly into another program. What we're trying to avoid is that they go from, daily activity to nothing, to coming home and staying home, because you find out that there's some waiting lists at some of these transition programs that can be kind of long. So you thought you would slide right in. Some of the waiting lists have changed as it relates to COVID, and how they're interacting with families have all changed. So having kind of an advanced heads up on that, kind of checking on those things are good. Um, One of the things we talk about, and I put this on there, the delay the driver's license, and we know that there are some families and their children will never drive, and then we have other families that maybe they're not ready yet, but they're still hopeful and optimistic, and we have some families that kids are driving. What I want to say is that there's a Miller driving rehab out there, and so for families that have kids that are ready to start this process and consider driving, Miller Driving Rehab works with families with kids with disabilities and helps give them the tools and resources. They have testing and all kinds of things to see if your child has the response times and the things that they need to be behind the wheel. Tier Memorial Herman also has some testing that you can do. Again, that's Tier Memorial Herman. And those are basically all the tests that they would give an individual that maybe has had a stroke or other type of disability, to see if it's safe for them behind the wheel. So there's that side of it. But Miller Driving Rehab actually does behind the wheel training, and they are trained and working with people with disabilities. So I just wanted to share that. And that is something that we came across that was very good and very, very helpful along the way. Okay. So when it comes to post-secondary education, all things are not created the same as you have known in the public high school or in the private high school, wherever you are. So if you have accommodations in the public school, an IEP or a 504, it doesn't necessarily transfer. Not, in fact, it does not transfer it to the college or a university. So the accommodations that you once had, you're going to have to advocate again to get those accommodations on a post high school level. So some of these things that you should be aware of is when it comes to the SAT and the ACT, maybe you've already done this, AP exams, college courses, graduate level exams, there are accommodations for these as well. But again, even if you have accommodations in the public school or in the university level, these accommodations don't flow over to the SAT and the ACT. SAT has a website, and the College Board has a website as far as accommodations. You can download the form that is needed. It needs to be signed off on by a doctor. Usually, oftentimes the people that do the neuropsych testing, it could or also maybe your psychologist or psychiatrist is recommending the particular accommodations that are necessary. Sometimes it might be a neurologist, it could be a number of different physicians, but you're going to want to get that signed, and you're going to want to have testing that is typically updated in the last 3 to 5 years. And so when I say typically, I kind of mentioned earlier that all things are not created equally when it comes to post-secondary education. And basically what I mean by that is every university, every community college, everybody out there has different rules and different ways that you're going to request the accommodations. So some might say 1 to 2 years, some might say 3 to 5 years. We've seen some of them relax on some of this because of COVID, and where maybe the testing was older than 5 years, but a letter that accompanied the testing from your physician that says, I have had a long relationship with this individual and their needs have remained unchanged, and here are the accommodations that they need. And basically we've seen some schools accept that as well. So start early. It could take a while to get the accommodations through SAT or ACT. ACT, again, has their own website and their own details of what you have to do to request those accommodations. Some of the accommodations could be extra time. It could be 50% or 100% more time. It could be testing in a closed off area, maybe our one-on-one testing or a small group size, and that could be some of it. I mean, they're not going to reduce any questions. You can have the questions read out loud. That's one thing. Sometimes there's use of a computer for the essay portion of some of those exams. So those are just to name a few, and their websites are going to talk about those. So that's for the testing. So as it relates to the SAT and the ACT, what we've also seen is, again, all schools are not created equally, and it used to be that every university required one of these scores. What we're seeing is a lot of the universities are relaxing on some of the requirements for the SAT and the ACT. And let's just talk about this. Sometimes our kids with disabilities don't test well. Okay, so you can take the SAT or the ACT and have accommodations, and their scores are going to be poor. And that is a fact for many. And if that's you, then you're not alone. And what I would say to that is that everything is not all about the test score. And if you are planning or thinking that you may enter into post-secondary education through the community college, the SAT and the ACT is not necessary. So that is, if this causes undue anxiety, because we see this as well in your student, in you, and this is just really not the path, like you're not planning on going straight to the university. We see a lot of maturity issues where we're not there yet. So maybe that transition program or that community college is a good stop first. If that's you, then you can throw the SAT and the ACT out the window. You don't have to do this. So these are just basically the testing and understanding what the accommodations, what the requirements are of the community college and the university or wherever it is that you're going, because you've got to go through that process. So what we don't want you to do is wait till school is starting in August and realize, wait a second, I need updated testing for Johnny to get accommodations at the university. And the university is already starting, and now it's 3 months before you can get updated testing. So he's 12 weeks into the 16-week semester with both hands behind his back because he doesn't have accommodations. So that's what we want to avoid. Working with the Office of Disability early in the summer, getting these accommodations in place before they start is really, really good, and it avoids that rush at the last minute, which a lot of people have. So I just, and my very last thing on this is, if you're thinking on the university level, basically anywhere, certainly if your child knows what degree path that they want to go, and you're specifically going to a school because there is a program that they want, that's one thing. But then secondarily, you need to research the offices of disability. They are not created equally. Some are really, really great. Some are very, very small with very few resources. And so if you know that your child needs audiobooks or they need voice to text recognition software, there's any number of accommodations that you may already have in the public school, and you know that those accommodations were necessary for the success of your child, then those are the ones that have to be non-negotiable when you're researching and kind of interviewing the offices of disability to make sure that they have those resources for you. I'm going to go to you, Jacqueline, for some questions.
Sure, we're good so far.
Okay, perfect. So the other thing that we want to talk about is reasonable accommodations. If it doesn't pose undue hardship in the workplace. For transitioning kids 14 to 22, there's a program many of you may have heard of, vocational rehab through the Texas Workforce Commission. This program is designed to, basically meet the student where they are, assess them for their any maybe deficits that they would have as it relates to the workplace, because vocational rehab is all about finding competitive employment. Okay, so helping your loved one find a job and have the tools and resources and training that they need to be successful to get and maintain the job. So this is a service that is It is state and federally funded, okay? And so a lot of these services, the testing, the training, and all of these types of things are covered. So this is something that you want to have on your radar. And if you don't already have an intake, you haven't already signed your child up for this or kind of looked into this a little bit further, this can help partner with the things that you're already doing, the things that you already have in place, and it can lighten the load a little bit because again, there is funding for this. This is not something that you have to do out of pocket, and the assessments are pretty good. They're pretty broad, and they're really, really good at narrowing in on what it is that your child needs help with. Some kids are impulsive. They make impulsive decisions. They say or do things that gets them in trouble quickly, causes them to get fired. Those are things that happen in the workplace. Some people just need, and there's so many different things that they need. Some people might need some money management or some how to disclose a disability to an employer, and there's just so many things that VR can help with. So we just want you to know about that. We definitely have contacts. Some of the things that we've heard over the past is VR is hard to contact. They don't call you back. The counselor leaves, and we've heard over time that that people have had some bad experience with VR over the years, and they've heard that loud and clear, and they're really trying really hard to make changes, and that they've hired people to kind of turn that around. And I have to say personally, I've had a really great experience with my own kids with this, and so I just want to encourage you, even if you had a bad experience in the past, don't be afraid to come back and kind of revisit this again. Okay, so educational options post high school. So I always say, I'm not affiliated with any of these universities or any of these schools or anything like that. These are just programs that have come up over and over again that we know are out there. They're out there. So either they have specific programs for people with disabilities. Some of them are degree programs. Some of them are certificate programs. Some of them are specific training programs for a specific industry so they could go to work, such as the restaurant industry or the early childhood or child care industry. There's a lot of different programs out there. Some of them are four-year university programs that have good offices of disability. So this is just a list. It's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's other programs out there, but one of the questions that we get all the time of where do I start and what do I look for, and is there any place that we can go? And so the answer is yes. And everybody on here, they all have, our kids have different disabilities, different abilities. And so between all the programs on here, there is a program out there that would be a fit for you. Do we have a question?
We do. Allison, do you know what the E4 program is at UT?
So the E4 program, actually, I think on our website, we had a college panel and they talked about the E4 program at UT. So specifically, I don't, because there's two programs. There's actually two different programs at UT. And so on our YouTube channel, there's a college panel. And what was cool is a lot of these programs, not all of them, they did a 3 to 5 minute little stint about who we are, who we serve, what we do, the why behind it, how long is the program. And so maybe we'll put a link to that webinar, because that gives you, in an hour, it basically gives you a snapshot of some of these programs, quick, fast, and in a hurry. So we can certainly do that. Okay, so Bloom Consulting. This is another one you may have heard of before. Bloom Consulting is pretty awesome. They're out in the Round Rock area, but they work virtually all across the state of Texas. In fact, in multiple states. They're very active in Nevada as well. But this Campus Connection program is an innovative program. It's really designed to be a kind of a wraparound program for individuals with disability that are going to post-secondary education. So I like to think of this program as a parent being able to back off. And so Bloom is basically what they do is they work with individuals with disability, and they're moving them towards independence. They do a lot of the vocational rehab type things, and getting people ready for work, getting them ready for success. And what I would say on for Bloom is I would love for you to go to their website, because they have a ton of programs that might be a good fit for you, and helping your kid, really get to where they want to be, and wherever you are in your journey. But this particular program kind of goes alongside. It's $1,000 a month, which sounds expensive. Some of them are $50,000 a year, so this one's actually really cheap. Um, but the $1,000 per month private pay, this is basically your student has a coach. So maybe you have a high functioning autism student. They've got their eye on an engineering degree and they're going to the university, but they need a little bit of help. You're a little bit worried. This is a wraparound program that's going to help on that, and it's going to let you step back a little bit, because a lot of our teens don't want to hear what we have to say on our coaching tips. Sorry, maybe that's just at my house, but anyway, um, but this really allows you to step back a little bit and let the professional step in. So anyway, we really think a lot of Bloom Consulting. So this is one. I don't have a slide for them, but the college living experience is a place where where the kids actually live there. It's in Austin, and then they go to the community college um, in Austin, or maybe it's College Station, but whatever. They live there, and they are learning life skills. They're learning cooking and living, and um, how to spend money effectively, how to do their homework, and things like that. And so they have kind of a dorm-like setting with help and aid. So we just wanted to mention that one as well. Jacqueline?
Mm, all good.
Okay, perfect. All right. So as far as getting started with special needs planning, some of the things that we want to talk about in transitioning, a lot of people have done some planning. Some people have done a lot of planning. Other people really just don't even know where to start when it comes to special needs planning. So we want to say, first and foremost, you really need to work with a special needs planner. If you have a child that is disabled and may need some level of care for the rest of their life, you really want to work with a special needs planner. And the reason why is we're really going to help you formulate a plan, but our plan that we're going to help you formulate is not going to accidentally cause your child to lose their benefits. SSI, Medicaid, RSDI, Medicare. There's a number of things that you can accidentally do that could cause your child to be ineligible for benefits, or could cause an eligible child to become, or adult to become ineligible, and to lose those needed benefits. So we want you to really gather all the necessary planning documents. And what does that look like? So there's really an intersection between special needs planning and financial planning. So when it comes to financial planning, we're really looking at all of the money in the buckets, and where are the buckets? What happens if I live too long? What happens if I die too soon? What happens if I become disabled? We're looking at, what if I need to retire and spend 25 to 35 years in retirement? Oh, me and my husband, we both need to do that. And what if I have a child that's going to need care for the rest of their life, not just mine? So when it comes to gathering all these planning documents, these are all of the things that you've put together. These are 401ks, 403bs, these are pension plans, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, savings bonds, basically any type of protection that you have in place, life insurance, disability, those types of things, wills, trusts, any other legal documents. So those are the things that you're going to want to gather together. So another thought is developing a letter of intent. We do have a webinar specifically on a letter of intent and what that is, but basically I call it a family love letter. This is, I'm mom. I know everything about my child. I eat, sleep, and breathe my child, and I forgot more than what most people will ever know, but it's all up in my head. So if something happens to me, if I'm incapacitated, I can't speak, or I'm dead, does other people know all of this information? And the answer is usually no. They know some of it, but not all of it. So a letter of intent, we have a template for this. A letter of intent is going to put all things that are related to your loved one with special needs, their primary diagnosis, secondary diagnosis, medications, doctors' names, address, phone numbers, their religious preference, where they born, the county they were born in, any schools that they've attended, the things that really make them tick, the things that really make them melt down, the things that maybe they're allergic to, everything your child. Again, you know all of these things that I think this document is like 17 pages, so it sounds a little bit overwhelming. So you can create your own. We suggest you create your own in a Word document so you can edit it a couple of times a year or as conditions change for your loved one. Um, but you also need to and give yourself some grace. If you don't have anything in place, set a goal to get a draft of a letter of intent done in the next 3 months, right? Because you can work at it a little bit of a time at a time. You don't have to do it all at once. It's kind of a process. And then once you have it done, then you can just go back and update it and edit it. But you're going to want to let your loved ones know, where is this letter of intent? So do you have a successor guardian? Do you your spouse needs to know where this is, and if something happened to both of you, then that important person or that successor guardian needs to know where this information is and what to do with it. So then we really want you to spend some time on formulating your vision of how you hope things will look for you. I should put you here in big caps, and your special needs child, because as parents we're always focused on everybody else and not us and not our vision. And you work 25, 35 years, you work really hard, and you're saving money and you're planning for retirement, and you have hopes and dreams for your own retirement in addition to your hopes and dreams for your special needs child. And what we see is a lot of times people um, put that special needs child on the forefront, and they forget about themselves and sometimes the other kids or the other needs that are out there. So really, when it comes to your plan, think about you and what you have in mind. Is there respite in sight for you if your child needs care for the rest of their life? Okay, we've talked about college, and I know that some that might not be in the cards for some that are on here today, and that's okay. But what does that look like? Will there be a transition program? Will there be partial residential care? Will there be respite care? And somewhere in your plan, even if you have a child that's going to need care for the rest of their life, there needs to be some respite care, some respite time built in for you, for a vacation, for some semblance of your retirement that you hope to have, whatever it is. But that is super, super important. And we see that it's missed a lot. Okay, so some of the questions that we hear all the time are, who will care for my child when I'm gone? Sometimes I hear people say that they haven't developed a future care plan, or they haven't named a successor guardian because, quite frankly, they don't know who they would name. They don't have someone, or they have a loved one with emotional challenges, and so they have family, but no family would step up to the plate. Or basically, there's no family left. So now what do I do? So if that is you, there are solutions out there. There are some solutions out there, and it is more difficult. It is definitely easier when you definitively have somebody, or you know somebody, or you trust somebody that could step into your shoes. But developing that future care plan and not delaying that will answer some of those questions. Some of the things that we talk about for transition is consider touring facilities such as Brookwood, Marbridge Foundation, Daymark Living, some of the transition programs that are out there. We hear about REACH, we hear non-Perel, we hear about a lot of different programs out there, but some of their waiting lists are very, very long. So get started. Start researching what those programs are. We do have some lists out there. We have lists for post-secondary education, partial and transition programs, and then full residential programs. And again, we're not affiliated with any of them, and by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just a list to kind of get you started, and maybe have some links in those lists where you can kind of check out their websites and see if it might be a good fit for you or your loved one. And then we really want to just say, make careful considerations before naming siblings as future caregiver. And this is a big deep breath and shock, because a lot of people do name the siblings as future caregivers. Sometimes they have nobody else. But when we say be careful with this, it really oftentimes saddles them up with responsibilities that they're not ready for. Or maybe they said yes in an obligatory fashion because they're family, and if they said no, that would make them look horrible. And they do love their loved one, but they have hopes and dreams too, just like you did when you were young, when you were 20, whatever that hopes and dream was, to have a house, to get married, to have a fulfilling career, or travel the world, whatever it is, whatever. There's no right or wrong answer here on the hopes and dreams. But what we like to see more so is that there is a special needs trust and that the sibling is the successor trustee of the special needs trust that will help organize and plan care and pay for care for the sibling so that the sibling can have a great relationship with their sibling and not be a burden to each other. But there's also sufficient assets to fund future care. So that's kind of the alternative to that. So how are we going to do this funding when it comes for all this care that we're talking about? If you have a loved one that needs care for the rest of their life, or if they need to be in a day hab or a transition program, or you need a full-time nanny, whatever those things. So one of the things as it relates to transition, a lot of our families, their kids have historically not qualified, even though their children are disabled. They've historically not qualified for SSI and Medicaid, and it's perplexing because clearly the individual is disabled. Why don't they get SSI and Medicaid? And the answer is, quite frankly, you just have too much money. And it doesn't take much, because if you have more than $2,000 if you're single, more than $2,000 in your name, more than 3,000 if you're married, more than one house, more than one car, then your child prior to 18 didn't qualify for SSI and Medicaid. A lot of people were denied once and they were mad, and so they don't go back and reapply when the child turns 18. So it's critically important that you reapply for your child that has disabilities for SSI and Medicaid when they turn 18, because magically it's based off of their assets at age 18, not yours. Even though they still live in your house, you still claim them on your tax return, it doesn't matter. It's based off of their assets. So if you're coming around the bend and you're thinking about transition, one thing to think about is that it is important that your child does not have more than $2,000 in their name in all sources. It doesn't mean we can have this account over here and this account over here. It's all sources of more than $2,000. Now, what if they do? Okay, so there's no such thing. We don't hide money from the Social Security Administration. we hear that all the time. So that's not the way to do it, and they find that kind of stuff, right? So if you do have more than $2,000 in that individual's name prior to applying for SSI and Medicaid, some of that money can be deposited into a special needs trust, or could be deposited into an ABLE account. And those are two places that you can have money above and beyond the $2,000 that won't be accounted against them for the means-based test for SSI and Medicaid. That's two ways. And the other way is that if you spend it down, okay? So it's not moving it, it's spending it down. So if that loved one has needs, they have care needs, they have therapy needs, they have medication needs, they have doctor's visits, they have clothing. I mean, there's so many needs our kids have, it never ends. Spending it down, maybe they need a laptop because they're doing online school. They need assistive technology because of their disability. These are all things that if we're spending down, that we can spend down and keep receipts on something like that as proof that we spent down. Do we have a question?
We do. The question is, does a 529 account jointly in the parent's name count towards that total? And I'm assuming the $2,000 for an 18-year-old.
So the 529 account jointly in the parent's name is not. So where the 529 account, so basically a 529C is going to be owned by the parent or the grantor essentially, and then there's a beneficiary on the 529C. So if the money is dispersed to the special needs individual on behalf of it could count if it's dispersed, but if it's in the name of the parents, then it isn't counted against. So what we've seen, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, but basically a 529C, so a lot of families have 529Cs and their child may or may not be going to college. However, they do have needs beyond college. And so an ABLE account will pay for college, can pay for tutoring, but it can also pay for a whole list of other things that a college savings plan can't. So basically on an ABLE account, it's a 529A. So college is 529C, 529A for ABLE, and it's achieving a better life for the individual with a disability whose disability started prior to age 26. So if you have a 529C, as of 2014, I believe we can convert. We can convert a 529C to a 529A, but you can only do $15,000 a year. Okay, so establishing a special needs trust for their future care. Again, a special needs trust. This allows multiple things. Number one, you can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust for their future care. This is where people leave their life insurance or assets to. So if I have a special needs loved one that might need care for the rest of their life, I have a life insurance program, a life insurance policy, and the beneficiary is set up to the special needs trust for the benefit of said special needs child, as opposed to naming the special needs child specifically as a beneficiary, which would cause them to lose their benefits. So if the money goes to a special needs trust, they maintain their SSI and Medicaid. If the money goes directly to them, whether it be from a life insurance contract or an inherited IRA, whatever. If it's more than $2,000, then they're going to disqualify. So basically, a lot of people, they use their life insurance and assets to provide funding for the trust, and of course, we have ABLE accounts as well. When it comes to the only thing that I really didn't hit on here yet is Social Security, disability, and Medicare, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this because there's some confusion. So what I mean by the confusion is a lot of times I hear people say, my child gets Social Security. And that is a common thing that people say. But when realistically your child gets SSI and Medicaid, now sometimes they qualify for Social Security disability because they've had some working credits where they've worked and they've earned their own work credits. And sometimes they're getting RSDI. So if the parent, either parent is either already retired or disabled through the Social Security Administration, then your disabled adult child is entitled to 50% of that benefit of whatever your benefit is. Yours isn't reduced, but they're entitled to 50% of it as long as you're alive and they remain disabled. And upon your death, then they're eligible for 75% of that benefit. So sometimes we've got concurrent enrollees where people are SSI and Medicaid and SSDI and Medicare eligible. So, and sometimes people start out on SSI and Medicaid and then mom and dad retire in 15 or 20 years and then they switch over, they keep their Medicaid status, but they switch over to the SSDI because the monthly amount is more. So what you don't get is the higher amount, the 50% plus your SSI, the 794. You're not going to like have this big windfall on this. So you'll end up getting the higher amount, but you still can be dual qualified for Medicaid and Medicare. So again, the word Social Security disability, and SSDI is based off of working credits. And a lot of our kids don't have any working credits. So it would be whether or not they're a disabled adult child under your record, which means their disability had to start prior to age 22. SSI and Medicaid is means-based. And again, if your child is not getting this, you will want to reapply at age 18. And this is a means-based, which means no more than $2,000 assets in their name. So I know it seems a little bit repetitive, but it's very confusing, and most people are confused. So if you've heard it before, and this is kind of remedial for you, I'm sorry, but most people are confused by this, and I just wanted to spend a little extra time on it. Do we have a question?
I have a question, Allison, from Teresa. What she wants to understand is how a special needs trust can pay for a place like Marbridge if a place like Marbridge does not allow, if Medicaid does not allow for paying for housing.
Okay, so that is a very valid question, and I don't have a great answer for that because this is something that's gray, and we talk about this all of the time. That's an advanced question, so kudos to you on that. So basically, what she's talking about is a lot of times people need a special needs trust and they need an ABLE account, and they don't know why. If I can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust, why do I need an ABLE account? And basically, the reason is an ABLE account can pay for food and shelter, and a special needs trust is not supposed to pay for food and shelter if you're getting SSI and Medicaid. So that's her point. And so the reason I don't have an answer for it is because the answer is gray. And it depends on how each of the facilities bill. So if they bill for room and board, then technically, no, it couldn't be paid out of the special needs trust. But if it's billed as a medical expense, then it technically could. And so what I have found in communicating with some of these different facilities around is they do have some residents that are paying their services out of a special needs trust, but me having my eyes on their bill or how they bill it properly so it can be paid out of a special needs trust. If it's room and board, if it's rent, or if it's a mortgage payment, basically you can't pay that out of a special needs trust. So that's her point, and that is true, and that is why people have an ABLE account. So an ABLE account, you can pay for rent, and you can pay for mortgage payments, and you can pay for room and board out of an ABLE account. So it brings us to the ABLE account slide. So the beneficiary is the account owner. So this is a little bit different than the 529C. We were talking about the parents being the owner of the 529C and then the beneficiary. So it's a little bit different. The income earned in the account is not taxable and contributions are not deductible, but it does not jeopardize SSI, Medicaid, or other public benefits. But there are special contribution limits. So basically you can put $15,000 a year into an ABLE account, and you can have a maximum of $100,000 in an ABLE account before you disqualify for SSI and Medicaid. And I don't know what the total maximum account value is right now. It used to be 370. It's probably up. But that has nothing to do with SSI. So basically what I talk about is how to not disqualify from SSI and Medicaid. So in that example, just know that the limit in the account is $100,000 and you can put $15,000 a year. If you have a 529C again that you would like to convert to an ABLE account, we can help you with that. You can convert $15,000 a year. So if you have considerable money in a 529C, you probably need to start that conversion process sooner versus later. There are many benefits to converting to the ABLE account because, again, what the ABLE account can pay for is much more extensive than what a 529C can pay for. But an ABLE account can, in fact, pay for college. An ABLE account can pay for tutoring. A 529C is very questionable on the no side of paying for tutoring. I would say it's very questionable, and they could call your hand on it. But an ABLE account definitely can pay for that. And again, if it's considered or construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability that started prior to age 26, it can be paid for out of an ABLE account. We have some additional questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so when do I need a special needs trust and guardianship? So a special needs trust will preserve the benefit eligibility while providing resources for your special needs child. So when do you need one? So there's a couple of answers here, and it's not a right or wrong answer. So some people don't have a special needs trust yet, but they have a will and they have something called a testamentary special needs trust. So basically, your special needs trust will form upon your death. And so any, beneficiary, that kind of stuff will be, it'll go to the trust and it'll form upon your death. We don't need a special needs trust right now. There's not more assets than what we need. And so we can have a testamentary special needs trust. That's one way. The other way is just go ahead and having a special needs trust. Okay, so there's two types. There's a first party special needs trust. This would be for any lawsuit or settlement that your child has gotten directly, scholarship refunds, any type of thing like that would be a first party special needs trust. There's a Medicaid payback on a first party special needs trust. If something happens to your child, then there is a Medicaid payback. That's the same thing with an ABLE account. A third-party special needs trust, also called a supplemental needs trust, there is no Medicaid payback. So there's an unlimited amount of money that you can put in that special needs trust. But here's where I want to talk about grandma and grandpa. So let's distinguish on what you need or what you don't need. And then a qualified attorney is going to spend time with you figuring this out. But if we have grandma and grandpa or aunts and uncles or friends and family that might leave your special needs child a considerable amount of money, then you need a trust, period. It's not a testamentary special needs trust because that would only form upon your death. So if they die and they're going to leave your special needs child a considerable sum of money, then you need a trust. And that money needs to be directed towards a trust, and working with a professional, an attorney or a special needs planner, then they'll help you with those conversations with that loved one to say, this is how we do it, because your average financial advisor that is working with your parents doesn't have background in special needs, so they don't know this, so they accidentally leave it to little Johnny directly. And then Johnny loses SSI and Medicaid. It's basically how this works. So that's the reason behind that. So as far as guardianship is concerned, it can be applied for 6 months prior to the child turning 18. We have a ton of YouTube videos on guardianship, partial guardianship, supported decision making, power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, and it's all across the board with all the people that we have on here. It's anybody's guess on where you may kind of fall as it relates to this. Guardianship does not have to be permanent, so you may have an 18-year-old that needs guardianship now, but they might not need it later when they're 25 or 26. Or maybe they need partial. You do take some rights away, rights to vote, rights to drive a car. There's some rights that are taken away, but the partial guardianship may be something else to look at. And again, some of us get by beautifully with a power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. Those are all things. And this just isn't, as far as a power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney, for those of us that have kids that are not, not disabled, when you're sending your kids off to college, period, it's a good idea to have this healthcare power of attorney and power of attorney, because if something happened or they get hurt and they're over 18, they're not going to talk to you. Also a good idea, whether it's your transitioning child or you have another child, is the FERPA. Okay, this is at the college level. Basically, even though the colleges fully let you pay all of the bills, they won't talk to you unless there's a FERPA on file. So FERPA. That might be something you want to add to your list. So if you've got kids in college, you might want to add that to your list. If you've got kids going to the college, you definitely want to add that to your list, because they need that. Even though you have power of attorney or healthcare power of attorney, they're still going to want that document. So as it relates to all of this stuff, I know I have a lot of do-it-yourselfers out there, and I commend that. But when it comes to special needs planning, we want you to work with a qualified attorney to prepare these documents. There's a lot of ifs and buts. You got to cross your T's and dot your I's, and there's a lot of requirements that are required by the Social Security Administration to qualify as a special needs trust. So it's very, very important. We are happy to make referrals. We have price sheets of many of the attorneys in town, and know which ones work predominantly with special needs. So we're happy to help with that. But
Allison,
don't do legal Zoom.
sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, no.
You have a few questions that popped up just as you were asking the last time, and I think you've answered them. One of them is, could you move money from a special needs trust to an ABLE account as necessary for room and board? I think you did cover that.
Yes.
And the other one is, could someplace like Bloom Consulting be paid through an ABLE account?
Yes, Bloom Consulting could be paid through an ABLE account. And one thing that I will tell you too, again, Bloom is pretty awesome, but Bloom has big relationships with vocational rehab and the Texas Workforce Commission. So it is actually possible. And I don't get to say who pays for what or anything like that. But like, as I said, they have state and federal funding, that vocational rehab program. So when they do the assessment of your child, if they determine that you need Bloom Consulting services or assessment or training or things like that, it is possible that VR will fund that they will pay that. So it's worth checking on. You don't call and say, I want Bloom Consulting, I want you to pay for it. And Allison said you guys are going to do it. Certainly that's not the case, but they really do a great job assessing. And if those are definitive needs, and what Bloom does in their wheelhouse is a definitive need, that your loved one needs to find competitive work, then that could be in your plan of action for vocational rehab. Okay, another question?
And there's one more. Can you clarify partial guardianship?
So as far as partial guardianship, so it leaves them with more rights. And what I would direct you to is our YouTube channel, and we'll put that in our email. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and do the playback. where we actually had attorneys talking about the guardianship, the partial guardianship, and the alternatives to guardianship. There's guardianship of the person, there's guardianship of the estate, and that's basically a whole presentation. But it was really, really good, and we have multiple, like I said, multiple recordings out there, and that's what I would recommend for that.
Okay. We have a few minutes left, Allison. I'm not sure how many slides you have left.
We're right here at the end. So basically the things that we've covered, these are things that should be on your special needs planning radar. We've talked about a lot of these things, but developing a comprehensive special needs care plan. So if you have a child that's going to need care for the rest of their life, a future care cost estimate, and figuring this out, because most families spend 20 to 35 years working and saving for their retirement, because they're going to need 25 to 35 years in retirement. And so a lot of families need that money that they've saved up all those years for their retirement. That money is not earmarked for a future care plan for their child. So we got to figure out what we're going to do with that. So we can help you with that. The Texas waivers and interest list, again, basically everything that you're seeing on this page here, we have a recording on our YouTube channel. So the waivers and interest list, we want you to have your children on the waivers and interest list in Texas. The interest lists are long, the waiting lists are long, so anywhere from 10 years to 17 years to anybody's guess to how long the waiting list is. I'm talking about HCS, class, Texas home living. There's a deaf blind with multiple disabilities. There's a yes waiver. There's multiple waivers. You're going to want to connect with your LIDA on that, your local intellectual disability authority for Harris County. That is going to be the Harris Center, and some of you may know it as MHMRA. It used to be called MHMRA. For Fort Bend County, that's going to be Texana for Fort Bend. And it's Gulf Coast for like Pearland and some of those other areas like Brazoria County out there. So also, you should know that a lot of people think that their kids are on the interest list and they're on 1 or 2, but they're not on class. There's a special phone number to call for the class interest list. So we just want you to be aware of those. We talked about SSI, SSDI, ABLE accounts, beneficiary designations, and basically it's important for your parents, loved ones, you yourself, not to name your special needs child directly as a beneficiary. And honestly, it's a good idea not to name your minor children as a beneficiary, because if you do and you die and your kids are minors, then the money is going to sit in trust until they're 18. And then your child is going to get all of the money. And most of the time, that's a really bad idea financially. Okay, special needs trust, how to fund them, child support, post 18 redirected to a special needs trust. This is a big one. I'm glad I had a reminder on here for this. Basically, if you're divorced, a lot of times in Texas, child support will continue post 18 for a disabled loved one. And so it really never mattered before, but you're going to need to get that child support redirected to a special needs trust prior to applying for SSI and Medicaid, or basically they're going to get denied. Okay, it's going to be counted against them as income and likely get denied. So you can work with an attorney on that. Ideally, not everybody gets along. There's a reason people get divorced, but ideally you can work with the other parent that's paying child support and put an agreement and get it signed off on in front of a judge, instead of kind of a fight about it, because it'll be a lot cheaper for us. It's the same difference. It's the same amount of money. It's just saying, hey, I need this to go to a special needs trust instead of him directly so he can get SSI and Medicaid. It benefits everybody for that to happen. So super, super important. And I think we basically talked about all of the other things. So that's all I've got. After today, again, we will put a recording out. We'll send an email with the recording. And in that, you'll have access to our Facebook page and our YouTube channel that you can subscribe to and kind of look for some of those other recordings that I talked about. And if you need our services, certainly feel free to reach out. I know everybody's situation is a little bit different and unique, and we're happy to talk with you about yours. And I'm just going to turn it back to you, Jacqueline, and any questions that we have out there.
One last question, if on the subject of the child support payments post 18, they can be directed to special needs trusts. Can they also be directed to ABLE accounts?
No. It would have to go to, well, no, it would have to go to a special needs trust, and it needs to be court ordered, honestly. It needs to be signed off on by a judge. And also, there are some issues in the state of Texas and across the country. So basically, if you're going through the Texas child support system, um, basically, if it's directed to a special needs trust, it's not necessarily enforceable through that. So that's an issue in itself. You can talk to your attorney, but the bigger issue, I mean, I think if they're paying all along, they're paying anyway. You can cross that bridge when you get to it. Maybe you didn't have enforcement issues to begin with, so who cares? So that's something that they're trying to work out. But it is not as simple as I open a special needs trust, then I open a special needs trust checking account, and then I go to the Texas child support and I just change the checking account as to where the money is directed. Because I've had people mention that before. That is not the way to go about doing it. You've got to do it the right way. So although you might be able to do that, it is the wrong way. And once it catches up with you, then it won't count. So it's very, very important to know that. We've definitely heard that before. So additional questions?
I think that's it. Allison, thank you so much. What a great presentation. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure being here with you today, and thank you for inviting us, and we're certainly happy to share and work with you going forward.
Sure. Thank you everyone for attending, and Allison's information is on that last slide. So thank you everyone for attending.
Have
Thanks,
a great
Allison.
afternoon. Take care.
Bye.